this point in Black Ops 4's life cycle, there's a lot of stuff you've kind of figured out for yourself or found from YouTube videos or from your buddy telling you about it, but in this video I want to talk to you guys about 10 things that you might not know about within Black Ops 4. Some things that either are little Easter eggs and fun little details that you may have never known about, to some things that actually could help you out in game to maybe save you a spot in your create a class system. That said, today we're going to be talking about 10 things in Black Ops 4 you may not have known about, and of course, if you guys have anything you guys would like to add to this list to maybe a follow-up video, feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and let me know how many of these you actually did know as well. That said, let's just jump right into it. Kicking off the list today, we're going to talk about a little bit of a smaller MP trick or benefit here that actually was mentioned in the last episode's comment section by one of you guys, talking about testing it out and checking it out for myself, but that being Skulker with and without Firebreak's reactor core. Because for those of you guys that have played around with Firebreak, you know that your movement when you enter that reactor core is quite slow, and even with Skulker it still is, but just how much does it, if at all, affect your movement ability when in your reactor core? Now to test this out, it's just a simple bit of basic measuring here at this, but when you take a look at your reactor core movement whenever you don't have Skulker on, you can end up moving a couple of meters in game. But whenever you then jump on to a class with Skulker, you can definitely see that you do move a little bit further. Again, while still in the measurements of just a few meters, it is something that allows you to have a noticeable change in the distance traveled while in this. Of course, whenever you have your reactor core up, it's only a few seconds to begin with, so it's not like you're going to be going from end to end of the map, but it is something that if you want to stay on the move, or at least patrol enough to the point where you're not a sitting duck entirely as somebody that may be out of the range your reactor core can shoot at you, you might want to be on the move a little bit further. So Skulker, if you're going to be using the reactor core, isn't half bad of an idea. Number 2 on the list transitions from something that may be useful in game to something that's more so just trivial and a little bit of backstory and fun Easter egg stuff here at this. But if you go over into Blackout, you can end up taking a look at the Molotov, in which the Molotov, if you get real close to it, you can read actually what's on the label, to which that label ends up having a skull on it with the words of 54 IPA. Now, for those of you guys that follow the backstory and the lore of Black Ops in the universe there, you may recognize 54I or the 54 Immortals from most prominently Black Ops 3's campaign, also a little bit of the MP backstory within Black Ops 3, and it is slightly sprinkled in the story of Black Ops 4, but not as much. It's not something that's brought up near as much as it was in Black Ops 3. But 54 Immortals is the group in which Seraph comes from, so it's interesting to see that link between the backstory that we already know of a Specialist and the everyday use that we may see this within Blackout and also ultimately MP. It's as well viewable in there, but a small little detail that may have escaped your glance. And believe it or not, there's actually a bunch of things within Black Ops 4 that have small labels on them that actually do make for some interesting little Easter eggs. The one most recently that was added in that has a little bit of a viewable label is the paint cans in Blackout. Those are actually pretty funny because it's as if you are spray painting on camos, but when you think about it, dark matter is something that's a fluid camo, and so it's not something you just spray on, but the label of that and other things in Black Ops 4 offer up one-liners and quips that are interesting and may give you a chuckle. When it comes to the next thing you may not know about, this actually was detailed to everybody in the recent episode of Black Ops Declassified, a series that Treyarch does over on their YouTube channel, talking about some of the ins and outs of the development of the game, in which in that episode they ended up talking with Trevor Walker, who's the director of technology and was responsible for the Ballistic system within Black Ops 4. For those of you guys that don't really know the ins and outs of that, Call of Duty has previously run on a hit scan system where it's literally point and click and your bullets are there to wherever your reticle or crosshair was, in which within Blackout it works fundamentally different than that. There's a ballistic system in place, so that means that there is bullet velocity, travel time, and distance that needs to be compensated for when taking your shots. The easiest way to view this is by taking shots at players from afar, in which you can visibly see the tracer rounds going off in the distance, arcing, and then eventually hitting the ground or the target wherever you were shooting at. But when talking about this a little bit further, Mr. Walker talked a little bit about the sniper scope design within Black Ops 4, and it's been in other games as well, but it's most relevant within Blackout because of the ways that you can actually line up and measure your shots. If you take a look at each individual sniper scope, you'll see that there are crossbars in the crosshair that give some sort of sizing indication. From there, you can end up using that and denoting how far actually down you need to go while aiming. So if you end up sizing it up with where the player fits in that box, you can just end up using that to mark down and compensate for how much of that bullet drop will be in effect when taking your shot over the distance. And while in the moment it is something that if you're in a situation like playing ambush in that final circle, you're not going to be able to compensate and absolutely calculate every single shot that you end up taking to guarantee that headshot or that body shot from a distance. But if you end up playing a solo, duo, or quad and you end up seeing somebody, say, camping on one of the rocks out in the desert, this is something that you might be able to take your time and size them up. Now, each will end up having different effects on different snipers because of the different ways of the variables in the ammo types and the bullet velocities, but the same premise works exactly the same with the scope on whatever sniper it is. So next time you go in with a sniper scope, maybe line up your shot a little bit and see exactly how well it can work out for you. And since we're on the topic of snipers, let's talk a little bit about briefly the Paladin with FMJ2. This is one that I don't really play around with the Paladin all that much. I got the Paladin done in gold very quickly into the game's life cycle so that I didn't really have to touch many snipers. But with the Paladin FMJ, you can actually destroy pretty much every streak. The only one that I think is impervious to this is that of the gunship. You won't get any hit markers here for it, but you can take things out like the Thresher in one hit, which is kind of crazy for that score streak. Given how much it does take to end up getting to that, being taken out in one bullet literally is quite wild. You can take out your UAVs, counters, and things like that, and it's just one that, when considering creating a class and knowing that there might be streaks up in the air, if you're sniping, chances are you don't really want to end up having to take a launcher, because if you get in a sticky situation, a launcher is not really going to help you, whereas a pistol may. But if you end up having FMJ 1 and 2 on this, you'll be able to take out most of those streaks with these. Next up on the list, coming to the halfway point, was one that I actually really wasn't thinking about mentioning because I kind of just thought it was a bit more minor, but after how many comments I got on the last episode talking about this, I figured I'd bring it up just so people do know and are aware of it. That said, if you end up taking some damage within Blackout, if you had armor, chances are your armor's going to be a little bit scuffed up, and you're probably going to have lost a little bit of health because that mitigation doesn't block every bit of each shot, but instead a small percentage. But here's where the little trick is. You can end up healing and repairing your armor all in one swift motion. You can do both of them at the same time. Now granted, it might take a little bit to get accustomed to because you're going to have to utilize your quick inventory while also ending up using your regular heal button, but it is something that can be done. And again, I didn't really know if there were many people that didn't know much about this, but having seen so many comments about it last episode, figured I'd want to throw it in here just so you guys had the information. Next up, let's jump into some things that are just rather quirky, one actually dealing with a little bit of a backstory, but ones that ultimately don't really change all that much about how you play the game, but are things you probably just didn't know about. Next up, we're going to talk about briefly something that's an Easter egg within the questline for Menendez, and it's actually a little bit of a callback to one of the previous CODs, and a very iconic moment at that. If you remember the origin story of Raul Menendez and his fit of rage in which he ends up going to avenge his sister, you end up knowing the correlation between yelling Josefina and where it connects in the Black Ops universe. Well, if you end up picking up the Raul Menendez questline out of a supply drop and you have a shotgun, every single kill that you end up getting or down at that, you'll end up hearing this audio quote in the background. To my knowledge, this is only triggered as a result of being able to utilize that quest line and having a shotgun getting that knock and or kill, and it's an interesting little callback to one of the more iconic moments within the franchise. Next up, we're going to be talking a little bit about the backstory of Black Ops 4, because if you guys remember, we did a video detailing the history of Hacienda, in which there was a board that gave away a lot of clues to previous maps and other maps within Black Ops 4. There's one part about that board that ended up detailing that the leader of the organization that this crime syndicate and crime boss was going against was referred to as Horse. Now, while a lot of the backstory will never be confirmed in the sense of outright, yes, this is right, it seems like we actually have a little bit of a reason for that, because Horse is believed to be Raul Menendez. We've talked about that many times on how it actually works, but the reason why he may be referred to Horse is because he himself had a Trojan horse operation. If you remember the events of Black Ops 2's campaign, the events leading up to and then during the mission Odysseus, Raul Menendez ends up getting captured, or so we think he gets captured, but it's all exactly what he wanted. He instead from there ends up breaking out with the help of Salazar and then infects the entire global networking system to control all the drones and ultimately enact his grander plan. But during that, he ended up giving himself up in a sort of manner relative to that of the Trojan horse. So, while again, we won't have anybody come right out and say that's 100% right, it seems like we now have some full closure as to why Horse is recognized as the leader in the backstory of Black Ops 4. Number 8 on the list kind of rounds out some of the quirky stuff here in this little bulk of that, but dealing with the Nom Nom emote. This coming from the Contraband stream, you ended up having the ability to have your character eat a sandwich and casually just look around, except there's a little bit of an alteration made for a handful of different characters. For those that have anything that cover their mouth, they actually don't eat it. Instead, look at the sandwich and then give the I don't know gesture, as if to say, I have no clue what to do with this. And so therefore, it's actually programmed differently for different specialists and different characters in the game. You'll end up finding these a lot happen with the blackout characters because they all have masks. You can end up seeing that Firebreak does it, and a few others as well follow in line. So again, a quirky little change up here that you might not have noticed, or may have if you ended up trying to use that emote at any particular time. The penultimate thing we'll talk about deals a little bit with the Cordite, one that I've actually been recently playing around with to try and get gold so I can progress the dark matter, but the Cordite has an operator mod that allows it to be belt fed, so therefore you never have to reload. You have a ton of ammo, and it's rather useful. But one thing that you may notice is that if you end up holding it down for too long, it will actually overheat and have a cooldown period where you can't use it no matter how badly you want to. However, if you end up going into water, you may or may not have known that this actually negates that. It doesn't heat up at all, let alone overheat entirely. So while it's a little bit more of a situational thing to keep in mind, if you end up having a gunfight that comes into the water that you need to spray down a ton of players, the Cordite will be totally fine in there. And the final thing we'll talk about is kind of closure on an Easter egg actually we've talked about once or twice here on the channel just in passing. But if you guys do remember, there was an emote that was available for sale out of a special order in which you could end up getting the Mobile Ops emote for 0, to which she ended up pulling out a tablet and then would end up playing on that. So we talked about before, this was actually the explanation why we saw some Dead Ops Arcade assets in the game files. They were then allocated to this because 0 is playing Dead Ops Arcade, but you end up hearing that there is a little bit more to that, and it's also a callback on top of that Easter egg. It ends up playing 8-bit audio of a race, essentially, but again, in Dead Ops Arcade, it's kind of weird. But it's a callback to the rally car level, but the only difference is the 8-bit is obviously added in on top, because if you go back and take a look at that rally car level, there is no such audio. But again, unless you end up putting a video file in there, you wouldn't be able to tell where exactly 0 would be playing in Dead Ops Arcade. So again, a little quirky one that doesn't really hold much relevance in the grand scheme of how you play the game, but it's something you may not have known. But that said, that's going to wrap it up. So let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Again, how many of these did you actually know? How many would you like to add to this list? If there's anything you'd like to add for maybe a follow-up, feel free to let me know your thoughts down there in the comment section down below. But wanted to kind of expand this a little bit to things that I thought were cool little Easter eggs, nifty little things that you may never actually look at and therefore may not know about, on top of some things that could be useful in-game. That said, that's where we're going to wrap it up, so hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you drop a like down below, and of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Black Ops 4, multiplayer, blackout, zombies. We got you covered with the best of updates, news, information, tips, tricks, all that good stuff. So if any of that interests you, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing. If you guys also want to follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, those are the best places to get connected from outside of YouTube. Practically live on both those. So if you guys want to strike up a conversation, ask me a question, whatever it may be, that link is down there in the description below. That said, thank you guys all so much for watching. My name's been Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.